And without further ado, Bach Learning Lab, please take it away.
Hey all, how's it going? Maybe we can just quickly introduce ourselves. I'm Marlon, director of the Learning Lab, and this is.
Hello, everyone. I'm Madeline. I'm one of the program coordinators at the Learning Lab. So excited to move through some fun AI things with you today. We also have Danny, who's excellent. Do you want to say hi, Danny?
Hi, everyone. I'm Danny Duke, the Learning Labs project manager. Thanks for having us.
And I'm just going to share my screen. We have some slides. As you can probably guess, a lot of the things we have to show you are digital. And so I'm going to pop this up. Hopefully everyone can see that okay. So those are our names, and you can find us if after this you want to talk to us about anything. Please reach out to the Box Center. We'd be delighted to meet up with any of you. And we're going to save time for questions today too, to get to talk to you all. And so what we're presenting today is kind of a series of experiments. I feel always very nervous presenting about this because this is so new. I'm suspicious of anyone who claims to be an expert or claims to know where things are headed, because this is very, very new for all of us, and it's transforming everything really dramatically, really, really quickly. And all we're trying to do in the Learning Lab is help out our really smart faculty and students as they're trying to figure out where this is all headed themselves, and innovating in this sort of generative AI teaching and learning space. So we have a few little projects we want to share with you, things that people have done with us over the course of the year. And then there are a number of students who have been doing just a little bit extra on AI under Madeline's guidance. And I want to make sure that she gets to present on them. And hopefully that provides a bit of a model of where we might head in the years to come. So I feel like we're sort of like in year one of the generative AI teaching and learning thing. I know that AI has been around forever basically, and I know that ChatGPT came out actually more than a year ago now. But I want to call that year zero because we were totally not ready, and we were kind of all in survival mode. We were mainly helping faculty that were really stressed out that all their students were going to be plagiarizing their papers from ChatGPT, and so we survived in year zero. But I don't know that we thrived. So I want to call this year year one, and next year year two. And so we're going to concentrate on things that we did in year one, which is this year, and then look forward to kind of what's coming next, what we think might be on the horizon for us at the Box Center in year two, and then just more broadly for Harvard and teaching and learning in general. And so to start off, though, I know not everyone necessarily knows the Box Center has worked with us in the past. So I just want to make sure that you kind of know who we are and know what the Learning Lab is within the Box Center, and just can understand, therefore, why we're even interested in working on this generative AI stuff this year. And so you should know that the Derrick Box Center for Teaching and Learning, we've been around since like 1975. I have not been here for all of those years, but I've been here longer than most people now. We help out all of Harvard's faculty and graduate students that are teaching Harvard College undergrads. And so this means we consult with faculty who are designing courses. We provide them with workshops, any kind of assistance we can provide them with when they're teaching large lecture courses down to small seminar courses. And then we also help out Harvard's PhD students as they learn to become teachers themselves. And we do this through workshops and seminars and teaching conferences and fellowship programs that we'll talk a little bit more about over the course of this hour. And this year, a big priority, as you can tell, it's right at the top of our online resources, has been generative AI, because so many faculty have been interested in figuring out what to do in response to this. If you click on our website, I think Danny might even throw this in the chat as we go along. If we encounter links, I think she'll just throw those in the chat, just in case you all want to check these things out, either now or later on. We've put together a lot of resources on AI for faculty this year. Everything from kind of language you can put in your syllabus if you're just anxious about students using it to cheat. Some ideas on how you might get students to use it kind of positively for assignments. Ways in which you could use it yourself as a faculty member to help you with your teaching tasks. And we've gone out to all the faculty, all the departments, at least we've made it available to all the departments to get a workshop from Box Center staff on how to make use of, among other things, the sandbox. Now within the Box Center for Teaching and Learning, there's this place called the Learning Lab, and that's where I am right now. Actually, I'll switch to a camera where you can see more of me. This is where I am. And over on the slide presentation, you can see a picture of our studio. And what we do is we help out courses where faculty are doing something kind of unconventional, something unusual, where they're going beyond what they've done in years past. They're going beyond just assigning papers or just assigning exams, and they're really frequently getting students to actually perform multimodal assignments as a way of responding to what they're learning in a class. So that means we support a lot of things like video assignments or podcasting assignments, web design assignments, game design assignments. And we partner with faculty as they design those things. And then we help them actually roll them out in classes by providing whatever support the professor thinks might be valuable to the students. So if they need a workshop on Final Cut Pro, we'll provide that. If they need us to help students by, putting a pop-up video studio together to record the students doing presentations, we'll help them out with that. So we can't work with every course every year. We work with a small subset of courses, but it's a set of courses that's trying to do something really imaginative that's pushing teaching and learning further. And that's kind of, where we come into the AI story. Definitely this year, we've helped a lot of folks work with the sandbox. The sandbox is amazing. There's so much it can get done. And again, through the main part of the Box Center, the sort of 70% of our staff, they've been focusing a lot on helping all faculty use that. But then what we've been doing is focusing on helping faculty that want students to maybe not necessarily use the sandbox, but maybe create a Slack bot or interact with a custom Slack bot. Maybe they want them to use, Stable Diffusion or Midjourney or one of the image generation tools. And so that's kind of the stuff we're going to show you today. I'm not for a moment presenting this as what everyone should be doing. These are just the weird things that we've done this year. And I'm hoping they can kind of, spark your imaginations and you also can give us ideas about where we can all head next. So essentially, here's what we're going to show you today is I'm going to give you a kind of not literally 1,001 things. We've done 1,001 things. I'm going to maybe give you like 11 quick hit things. And then Madeline's going to do a deep dive into the group of students that helps us get this done, because I think it's really instructive to hear about them and actually just even look at some of their projects and even some of their code if anyone is interested in that, to get a sense of how they got all this work done. So what sorts of things are in that kind of weird bot territory? Well, one big category, I think, is imagining ways in which you could use generative AI as a teacher. There's a lot of excitement about using AI tutor bots. CS50, a lot of you probably know about CS50. David Malin's usually the first to do anything around Harvard. And they created their Duck AI bot. And now I know that Hewitt is itself working on a kind of Slack, like a tutor bot framework that will be available in Slack coming up at some point in the future. And we've been trying to do that too. Again, not at the level of technical sophistication that you all can do at Hewitt, but in our sort of down and dirty, quick prototyping way within the Learning Lab. So one example of this is, I don't know if anyone remembers Hunt Lambert. He was the dean of DCE for a while. He's an entrepreneur himself. And he was working with a course called CE10, which is Creativity and Entrepreneurship 10, where students have to design a social venture as a kind of entrepreneurial project. And they each got to have a half-hour meeting with him where he gave them feedback on their projects. And then Hunt gave us permission to use the transcripts of those Zoom calls, of which I think there were roughly 6 hours or something, to train a tutor bot that could then respond to students as they were developing their ventures. And so, for instance, here's Hunt Lambert bot talking to, this is not actual student work. I can't share all the actual student work, but here's a student who's asking about starting a hot dog stand that also sells books. And here's the Hunt Lambert bot, which looks a little like Hunt crossed with a robot, giving them, some ideas about what their value proposition might be, what their customer segments might be, what channels they might work with. And all of this is based on, first of all, some texts that Hunt thinks are really important in business development, and then also on Hunt's feedback to the students. So that's one big category of thing, are these tutor bots that could be trained on actual teacher ideas and teacher responses. And then this is, and Madeline even could jump in if she wants to say anything now, but Madeline helped one of our internal classes here at the Box Center on how students learn, where students read a lot about, and these are graduate students that are learning to teach themselves, learn a lot about cognitive science approaches to memory and cognition cognition and how these might impact the way we teach students in the classroom. And she constructed a custom GPT that again is trained on, course materials and can give people feedback because it's capable of retrieving from those materials. And I think this is kind of like that basic TutorBot design pattern that I think everyone's psyched about right now, which is having the TutorBot be able to see some things that are being read in the course and then be able to have its response range limited. And in this case, Madeline and Tamara Brenner, our executive director, worked to limit what the bot can say back to students. So it's not giving them all the answers. It's kind of prompting them to think for themselves and make sure that they're actually learning what they did in the class and they're not just kind of getting the answers from the answer key that the AI is providing. But while that is for sure a category of things, and honestly, that's probably the most important category of thing, that's why Hewitt is working on it. The thing we probably actually spent even more time on here at the Learning Lab and is the most fun for us is where students are using generative AI in their own work, where students are not forbidden from using it, but they're actually encouraged by the course to use generative AI in one way or another. And I just have a couple of samples of this before, again, we go on and Madeline helps explain how we get all this stuff done. And so one initial thing we did towards the beginning of year one is we worked with a TDM course, Theater, Dance, and Media. This is a course where students are learning how to become theater professionals, screenplay writers, actors, performers of all sorts. And what we did with the instructors is we taught the students in the class how to kind of fork a Slack bot. They were using, I don't know how many folks like do a lot of coding and things like this, but we had these theater students who had never coded before, and we plopped them in the middle of these Node.js Slack bot apps. And now they were just varying a variable here or there, but it was very exciting for them to get in there and then see immediately the responses that the personalities that these bots would have. And so what was going on here is they were constructing a dialogue between characters that they designed. Here, and again, we'll send out links to these things, is actually a dialogue between a couple of theater critics that the students designed arguing about the nature of theater. And so they designed these bots and they kind of hit play in the Slack channel, and then the bots went crazy talking to each other and generating this dialogue. And it was really exciting, and a lot of really exciting emergent phenomena took place that really gave me an understanding of kind of where we're headed next. And one of them was there's something about moving beyond the scale and pace at which a user can interact with a chatbot. Like when I'm typing into any chatbot, OpenAI or the Sandbox, I'm kind of limited by how fast I can type, and then it's got to respond, and then it kind of goes back and forth according to that pace. What was really exciting here is when we kind of set these bots, exciting and terrifying, I suppose. When we set these bots loose, they create this pace of recursive intelligence that is really exciting and does totally unpredictable things that were really exciting for the students to reflect on, and the students and faculty reflect on in the context of the course. Another example of this, we just worked with a course, Complet 280, where students are learning how to use lots of different Python libraries, but some AI APIs to write poetry. They're essentially making their own books of poetry, and we're teaching them how to create a front end for that. But the exciting part of it is them getting to do these AI generated poems. And here's another Slack bot we exposed to them this year was having a poet bot that essentially just obeys the little snippets of Python code that they created their poet bots in. But then we added in loads of listener bots that would hear those poems and then give criticism of it. And for instance, in this case, this is a romantic poet bot that's writing a poem about sorry, my screen is about a bot that creates poems. And then the poet bot responds, "Upon my quill, a tale to now unfold of yonder bot that weaves its verses fine in silicon shape. It breaks tradition old, yet daring new frontiers doth it align." And then the critic bot is told to hate romantic poetry and respond from the position of a modernist poet that attacks whatever the romantic poet posts. And here the critic bot comes in, "Oh, how the charm of faux romantic poetry, much like poorly aged wine, can turn sour quite quickly. The given poem is a frothy mix of poorly conceived sentimentality and embarrassing naivete." Anyways, now this is not, in a sense, content-wise, any different than any of the fun stuff I'm sure all of you have created by interacting with ChatGPT all year long. But there's something kind of fun for the students when they're developing these agents that they can kind of turn loose to do cool things with each other. And again, often in recursive ways that are kind of exciting. So next up, we're doing, because we're the Learning Lab, we do all this crazy visual stuff. We really frequently have students interact with the multimodal AI APIs and tools. And we've done a ton of things this year with Stable Diffusion, which is one of the main tools people use for AI image generation. When students come in here, we often get them to do some kind of theater game-like intro activity. In this case, they have to do a pose on stage that kind of represents them as a person. Here we see a student clicking their heels together. We also, if they don't want to be on camera, give them the option of just taking one of our little artists' dummies and putting that in a pose. And then what we do is we use the OpenCV library to open pose to get their body's configuration, its pose at a given moment in time. And then we use that as a constraint in Stable Diffusion to generate output based on the student's pose. And so here this student has been turned into a kind of Spider-Man. I think we also have this is really great, a scuba diver. I don't even know what this is. This is some forest man jumping through a tree, and so on and so forth. This has been one of the greatest hits of the year. Now, of course, I mean, this is just playful and fun. This is actually not from the same class. This is from a dance class. So this is maybe slightly more justifiable because they were learning about the history of ballet, and they were learning how the body kind of functions as like a signifying thing. It kind of, I know this is sort of fancy artsy stuff basically, but the idea that like the body possesses the kind of knowledge and ability to speak and that bodies learn from other bodies is kind of what they were learning about in this class. And so the idea of your body kind of teaching and training the AI to respond was quite powerful as a thing for the students to reflect on. So that's what this student's doing here. And this is also, you could imagine, this is the data viz that is produced in a Python script for Blender that created a bar chart. It's just a distribution plot that was generated in a bunch of different ways. So that has been like one of the biggest hits of the year, definitely Stable Diffusion and constraining the AI in different ways. I think that's one of the dominant themes so far, is to get most value out of it. We need to find some way of kind of constraining the output. And then kind of to take it in a totally different direction. I know a lot of you and a lot of folks around here are concerned about the ethics of AI. And one of the other kind of cool courses I think it's interesting to reflect on was on race and AI, taught in EMR, ethnicity, rights and migration. And in that course, students were learning kind of the way in which AI produces certain sorts of culturally dominant modes of gender, modes of family, attitudes towards race. And so the faculty member wanted us to kind of give students a way of peeking under the hood of some of the AI image generators to kind of see how this happens. And so we designed an activity where they were able to generate images with prompts that are kind of connected to those big themes. And then they were able to see kind of how the sausage is made in different ways. And so in this case, this was a prompt that said, show me a family. And what's interesting is by the time we ran the course, there had been so much backlash against the models for reproducing certain sorts of racist stereotypes that guardrails have been put in place. And I know probably everyone heard about the Google guardrails because that became a big news story essentially. But in this case, OpenAI has these guardrails in place that are meant to kind of push back against those stereotypes. And so what it does is it takes the prompt you send in and it turns that into a revised prompt. And the students were able to, in a simple Google Colab, create the prompt and then see the JSON that they get back. And in this case, it says, instead of just saying, hey, give me a family, it says, an idyllic farm scene showcasing a hefty pig indulging in a scrumptious dinner of vegetables, such as carrots, lettuce, and beetroot. The pig, seeming blissful, engrosses itself in the meal. Nearby, a farmer, a Middle Eastern man of sturdy build and a tender smile, is seen observing the pig. With him stands his wife, a Caucasian woman with warm eyes and loving expression, and their 3 children, a Hispanic girl, a South Asian boy, and a black boy, all with the same spark of youthful curiosity in their eyes. They all seem to adore the pig heartily. And so we gave the students the ability to interact with this, and they got tons of really interesting interpretable data. It's almost like they're getting a little bit of a cross-section of the culture at a given moment because the AI has been trained on all these models that are made up of all the language of the moment. And the students, being students and more creative than me, would began to send the results of one prompt back into the machine to make a second prompt. And so this is kind of where they ended up to in that workshop, where they would create an image. Then they would get the description of that image. Then they would send it back and ask for the inverse of that image, get the description of that image, then send that back and get the inverse of that image, get the description. And you can see kind of where this is going. And I don't know if Danny wants to jump in at this moment. She actually has an amazing public Airtable gallery view of like all of the images that the students generated. I don't know if she wants to show the test one or maybe the family one, but I'm actually going to stop sharing anyways because Madeline's going to jump in after this. But essentially what was really cool about this is that we kind of help students learn this basic tool, but they took it in directions that we couldn't have possibly imagined, that we couldn't have possibly anticipated. And that's kind of like the magic of what happens in the learning lab is we have some ideas about how something could be useful, but then as we set students free to do what they want to do, they come up with ideas that then kind of set our direction in the future. And so the fellows that work here, the Learning Lab undergrad fellows, the media and design fellows, and the students that take part in the courses, they play such a powerful role. The jargony kind of way of articulating this is you could call this participatory design, where the end user actually takes part in the design process. But whatever you want to call it, it's really kind of like the special sauce of what we do here. And all the kind of cool things we did this year kind of come out of that. So Danny, what do you have here? Do you want to like show them one of these opposite to opposite things? The cat is like less politically fraught than the others. So maybe we could see what's the opposite of a cat and then what's the opposite of the family. That's cool too, actually.
Yeah, so we have this cat, which Marlon, I think, prompted. We love cats at the Learning Lab. So yes, there's lots of cats here.
Well, that's always the test. The first test has to be a cat with any technical tool, right? I mean,
so you can see that we have the collab synced with our Airtable. So the prompt was just a cat. You can read the revised prompt here. And then the opposite of the cat is right here.
that's the opposite of a cat. Totally.
I think this one is kind of
the family and the opposite is
too.
the real powerful thing. Yeah, I mean, that's.
So here's this family. You can read. I dropped the link if anyone wants to read more of the prompts. And then the opposite of the happy family was this intense, very intense photo.
So there's a certain pleasure of creating things like this. Clearly, like this stuff is just fun. But what's amazing for me, what my dream is always in the Learning Lab is when that the experience of fun is directly aligned with what students are learning. And so again, it's not like the kind of spoonful of sugar helping the medicine go down, chocolate flavored broccoli, whatever you want to call it. It's where they're actually doing the thing. They're thinking about culture. In this case, they're thinking about patterns within culture, the patterns that emerge when you think about oppositional or dialectical relations between parts of culture. And they're finding that immediately fun. And that's what's so cool about the way AI was augmenting their thinking, is they're thinking about the course content, but it's not just, again, like this sweet taste that's masking what they're really supposed to be learning. They're finding direct pleasure in what they're learning through it. And that was really powerful. Well, so Madeline, I know I have a couple slides before your part, just to break the fourth wall, but you should just jump through and share, or get ready to share. And I'll kind of set it up by just saying that from the very beginning of the Learning Lab, what we've always done is use students to develop everything. We initially hired student usability testers, but they were so talented as designers themselves. They'd always have better ideas than the old people on our team, like me. And so that's when we started calling them fellows, because they're members of our community, and they test what we do, but then they really do build what we create here. And so one special group of those Learning Lab undergrad fellows this year is the GAICAs, or General AI CAs, and they've been working under Madeline's guidance and leadership. And I think that she'll share a few of the projects they've done and just even talk about it as a model a bit, because I think it's pretty exciting. So Madeline, I'll shut up and let you jump in.
All right. Hello, everybody. I'll start my screen share. You'll get to see my marvelous back end. There we go. Haha. All right. So yes, as Marlon said, today we'll be talking about the GAICAs. And also, as Marlon said, these are, in short, GAICA for short, Generative Artificial Intelligence Course Assistants for long, if you will. So yeah, Marlon's been talking a lot about the why and also some of the what, especially when it comes to what we've been doing for students in our workshops who usually come into the Learning Lab for a short amount of time. And then they're exposed to these technologies in kind of short theatrical units in which, again, as Marlon said, they are hopefully having fun while deeply engaging with their course material. However, from whence do these tools come? And that's really where our GAICAs come through. So as Marlon has said previously, we've had fellows for quite a while. We have graduate student fellows. We also have had undergraduate Learning Lab undergraduate fellows. And that's really where the GAICA program grew out of. So as Marlon said, in terms of our kind of the ways in which we support courses, our positioning within the FAS ecosystem, as well as our multimodal skill set, made us good candidates to kind of dock these GAICAs. And really what we did this year is the second iteration of the GAICA program. The first was started in early 2023 by Chris Stubbs, who is the now former Dean of Sciences. And essentially, the program was started to give students funding, time, and support to create various AI tools for specific courses. And, when the students started out, as you can imagine, many of these, unsurprisingly, were focused around Slack bots. However, this was an experiment, so many emergent, strange things came out of it, which we'll talk about. So these are 3 of some of our GAICAs having a lovely time. Of course, we always record students. Here they are, sitting where Marlon is now. When we brought these students together, though, we had a novel problem. How do you get a group of people, all with varying levels of coding proficiency and highly different academic backgrounds, started on building AI tools? And then we added an extra layer of complexity. Well, we didn't add it, the universe did. And that is the AI market. New tools are constantly appearing and the old ones are updating or overhauling their API methods at a rapid pace, something I'm sure you are all familiar with. Thus, how do we get this group of people together to maybe create something with an end product like a Slack bot? How can we scaffold their work in such a way that nothing is lost in this process? So this is where our workflow came together. And again, we've been talking about the what and the why. Now this is the how. So here's just a quick diagram, very short, made this morning, of the kinds of things we are doing. So really, we kind of split it into 2 categories. There's the really basic code architecture. To do this really quick iteration, because of the malleability of what we're using these tools for in terms of courses, as well as how quickly, again, the APIs are changing. We did a lot of our work in Google Colabs. This allowed for lots of experimentation. It allowed for quick sharing between accounts. And we started that with what you'll see here, something called a single. And this is just a single API call or function that we make sure works every single time. It's usually in one code cell or a few, and I'll show you guys an example again of the collabs similar to what Marlon was showing before. And then these singles can be stacked or slightly changed in some kind of order to create what we dubbed a machine. And we have many different examples of that from courses. In fact, that recursive image generation you saw as an example of a machine. Again, the single would be the API call to Dolly, please generate an image. And then, of course, we're just adding the extra layer of getting that JSON dump to reveal the revised prompt. And then when you stack all these singles together, that's when you can start to get this machine-like quality. And then occasionally we bump things up to Python servers. And all of this comes together to create kind of experimental single tools and mechanics in a really low stakes, low code way that people can quickly test just to make sure things are working. And again, to allow for these kind of emergent experimental discoveries from our students on the way to building larger projects or more complex tools like a Slack bot. And then, of course, we have the other side, similar to what Marlon was saying with, everyone, it's kind of this rush to tutor bots, this rush to, how can we quickly as possible create these assistants. And as you all know, it does take some time. So again, how can we create a scaling system for these students coming from various backgrounds? And this was especially helpful for students, GAICAs with less code. So of course, we encourage everyone constantly to interact with ChatGPT and as well as other models through the sandbox, just to get a feel for how prompting works, what things are made. Then when a student has an idea for either a single course that they want to support, or again, a single mechanic, something where an assistant is doing a thing similar to critics. We have them bring it into the GPT playground, which is easily accessible. They do it through our account, and that way they can test out similar functions like, not functions, but the retrieval of knowledge from a knowledge base, and eventually maybe scale it up to functions, which brings us to the Assistants API, which is newly out. And they, again, can either programmatically create those, which is tough, or you can just go to the handy dandy playground. And again, the GPT and Assistants, as I'm sure many of you know, is very similar. So there's a really nice scaffolding process there where almost all of the inputs into a GPT are found in the Assistants, just with slight more complexity when you get into threads, messages, etc. You can then call these assistants in a collab for really quick iteration. And then that gives you kind of, when you combine these tools, mechanics, these finished assistants, when students are happy with the products they're getting in their collab tests, they can bring it all into a Slack bot if they so choose, or other mysterious projects, which we can talk a bit about. So I'm going to just really quickly walk us through a collab. This is very similar to the collab we just saw, but just to give you guys a window into how we're working with these collabs and how they kind of look. So again, it's very low code. We are asking people to kind of describe what they're doing. You'll see some repetition of code. This isn't the cleanest code. Again, multiple people are working on it, and ChatGPT often helps these students as they're going, as I think this is a safe space, we can all admit. So we're going through, just mounting it to Drive. That's been very easy for us to do these file uploads, having the paths in maybe one Google account. So again, multiple people can come in and work on the same code. The usual dependencies, defining keys and utils, we go. And once again, these are almost all the code you're seeing here, and that also adds to the repetition, started out as a single. We have an enormous library of single API calls that were slowly built up. We have this, sending it to the Airtable database, as you saw with Danny, moving through how we're defining certain objects. And then we try to put all of the code towards the top. So if we are using it in a workshop where there's no coding, we don't have to scare students who are terrified of code. So we can just scroll down really quickly and get to this run once tab. And then, how familiar. You can really quickly just pop in a prompt, what is in this image. And then things go through. So I ran this morning, so all my images have disappeared. I can run it again. Of course, it would be found in the Airtable, which is our handy dandy way of holding on to things. So here's, again, our larger Airtable of where people are making things for quick access. So that's just a quick collab. That is what we deem a machine. We have other, various other examples, however, of different projects and different ways these machines can be stacked. Because as you're seeing, the machines are not too complex, but we do have a few more things. So perfect. It'll just hop me out here. All right. So I'll move my bar. Perfect. All right. So let's move through just, again, some of these projects and
Madeline, you're going to share, sorry to jump in, but you're going to share this doc too, or Danny
Definitely.
could even share this doc, just so that, because I know we're sort of throwing a lot of things at you, but if you want to take your time to look through this, Madeline's reporting on everything in public, and if anyone's interested, you really check it out. Sorry, I will shut up. I just want to make sure that Danny
not
can
at
send
all.
the link.
So yes, I will definitely send the link to everybody. I have a larger doc as well with other things contained. And Danny, if you want, probably the GAICA like not this, but the one I sent to Tamara would be a solid one to drop in the chat. Yes, so we're reporting very publicly, and again, just for a little bit more on the how. So we have students do first this kind of learning project of going through singles. Maybe they stack a machine, they're getting used to Colab, they're getting used to our workflow, because again, AI is but one part of our much larger lab system. And then they can pitch these larger projects or projects as a whole. So again, these single code blocks, we made tailor-made singles for one of the courses we've worked with a lot this term, Complet 200, in which people were generating folk tales using AI in many different forms. So again, the Gaika's work aimed to enable students to engage creatively with the course's objective. And that's really, again, we're just trying to provide these singles, these code blocks in a simple way as possible so people who have never coded can feel comfortable interacting and stacking these tools. And we had many different Gaikas work on that. Then again, scaling up to machines. We made many different machines, but the two we've talked quite a bit about. Of course, we have the recursive machine for EMR 16 that you guys have seen a bit and we've talked a lot about. But one of my favorites, and maybe because I was an undergrad here and I did folklore and mythology as my concentration, very intense, I know, were these folktale or fairy tale generators, which again utilize the stacking of singles in innovative ways. So maybe they're making the images first, and then from that comes text. Maybe they're copying a tale, like we had many little blank Riding Hood generators in which the color of Riding Hood's cloak changed from red to yellow to white, kind of based on this Italian, speaking of modernism or postmodernism, as Marlon was speaking of earlier, Minari, who worked on creating different compendiums of fairy tales in Italian. So we had fun with that. And again, all of these were made in Colab. We had some Gaikas push this up to kind of a front end so people could interact with it through a website. And we can also deploy these in Slack. So again, that's why it's so great to slowly iterate this code, because no code goes to waste, and then we can just transform it in different ways while keeping this iterative capability and this really an ability to quickly change directions depending on, you know, what is thrown at us. We have a few different tutor assistants, Slack bots, for different courses, everything from, and again, what we try to also do at the Learning Lab is be a bridge between the humanities and the sciences. And I think that's pretty well summed by our kind of two main tutor bots this year, one for philosophy and one for physics. But now I'll pivot towards, you know, what occurred. So we had 5 Gaikas docked with the Learning Lab, but there were other Gaikas kind of around, especially more in the sciences producing things. We had them come in every 2 weeks for meetings, not just to report to us what they were up to, because many of them came into the lab anyway to work, but just to give them space to report on what they're doing and interact with one another. So many interesting collaborations and generations came from people meeting together, and not just online, but face-to-face. That was very essential. And then again, just giving them the support to be the amazing students they are. That's one of our favorite things that the Learning Lab is, similar to letting a bunch of bots loose in Slack. We really just like to let a bunch of students loose in the lab and see what comes up. So we had a few other things built by our Gaikas. We had a generative music model produced for a student working in part with Music 225. In this class, they're focusing a lot on classical music. And what this student wanted to do, he had found a data set of musical notes turned into text. So it would have the note like a G, then it would have a symbol indicating if it was perhaps a flat or a sharp, and then it would have underscores letting the model know, you know, essentially letting the model know how many beats that music was held, could identify patterns, and then create monophonic generations based on this data set. He is now trying to up it to kind of MIDI files, getting it to polyphonic melodies. He wants to have the input be actually him playing on the piano and then have that transformed on a back end. So that's something, again, that is really doing all the things we want it to do, being a bridge between so many different aspects. And now you'll recognize perhaps Marlon's hands, similar to what you can see right now. So this is an overhead CV model, exactly, haha, produced by one of our Gaikas. As you can see, we use cards quite a bit for our tools. So having a CV model that can recognize hands, not only on our table, but also the student took the testing to an extreme by creating many different kind of card and hand videos. And then she individually went through and identified what was card and what was hands and all these images, and then fed it to the model. Now, what do we hope to do with this? This is one of those cool things that, again, if you train it, we're going to look forward to maybe when a card of a certain color comes in, there's different lights, or maybe a different sound, or maybe visuals are generated from these cards. There's so many things you can do. But again, what we really ground ourselves in is this focus on multimodal spaces. And again, just kind of constantly being this weird nexus bridge between disparate places, fields, thoughts, modes within the academy, within this weird, wonderful university in which we reside. So this could be applied to physical spaces, classrooms, workshops, etc. Especially as currently AI is mostly constrained to the laptops and the web browsers, but we posit that that will slowly not be the case. And then finally, something you guys have seen before, again with this Slavic class, are these live generative transformations that we tried to do on the green screen, which is mostly a lot of fun. But really, when you take in all of these different fields, there are genuinely so many fields and knowledge domains in which space is one of the main forms of communication, especially embodied space. So ways we can recontextualize that for students and kind of like bring that forward is great. And we had lots of students work on, everyone's very excited to hop up on the green screen and then get things stable diffusioning. So that's just kind of a window. Again, as you can see, we didn't just have Gaikas by the end. We'd even kind of sucked in some of our Learning Lab undergraduate fellows who normally just help with workshops in non-AI capacities. They were helping out with code and AI. So we definitely see AI leaking and spreading to essentially everywhere. Just because, it's, as you all know, there's so much utility to this, and it's going to grow so much. So I'm curious, speaking of that, Marlon, where do you think year 2 will take us? This is year 1.
Well,
and
thanks.
all the
Yeah. Well, so I think, it'd be interesting to think about what comes next, but I want to make sure we have time for questions. So I want to throw it open because I want to make sure that anyone asks us for clarification or more information on anything. As I said, we are around, as I hope we are conveying implicitly, at least, and now let me convey it explicitly. We are friendly, or we're delighted to talk to everyone all the time. And so people should please reach out if you're working in this space and you want to talk to us, or you think we could collaborate on something. Just this is open invitation, just always, get connected to us. But are there any questions? I can definitely hypothesize myself some things that might come next, but does anyone have any questions or comments or related things you've been working on this year that could be interesting?
Marlon, there's one kind of question in the chat from Abba, it looks like, about curious if you experienced these chatbots ever making things up and impersonating a student as user to complement it on it. So Abba says there have been instances where Claude has done so. When that was called out, it admitted that it had made it up. So I guess that's a larger question about hallucinations.
Yeah, clearly this is a problem. I mean, we've been thinking about this a lot. Everyone's thinking about this a lot. One thing, I mean, this isn't the direct answer, but one of the kinds of things we've been thinking about involve kind of like those recursive moves Madeline was talking about. We showed you mainly the fun things like, make me a bunch of images. But one thing that stresses me out when I see ChatGPT get going on something, especially if you're using one of the interface that streams, is it's like BSing essentially, like what we humans would call BSing. It's just giving you the next word and then the next word and then the next likely word and then the next likely word. And there's never a moment where it takes the totality and kind of evaluates that the way a human editor might do, where they revise something or evaluate a piece of text. So I do think there's a lot of power in building in stages of evaluation, which means not a single like one-shot call to the AI, but multiple calls, which again is going to be slow, but make sure that there's some kind of like quality assurance or some kind of evaluative step. And that's kind of what we've been experimenting with, getting at those. The proof of concept is like the fun poet bot and critic bot and things like that. But what we're starting to use that on internally are ways of getting better final output by sending things back through with more and more structured prompts. And then again, what's sometimes called function calling in the OpenAI API, where we can constrain the output a little bit more. In the image world, this is quite easy to do already. This is what people have been thinking about constantly, is how to use ControlNet and in painting to kind of constrain the AI and make sure it responds more in the way you want it to respond. I think we're kind of just starting that in the textual space, partially because it just takes so long and people demand their chatbot respond immediately. But I think that, to me, when I'm thinking about year 2 things, that's going to be one of them, is how we can assure that there is quality, there are fewer lies, fewer hallucinations. That's definitely better all around.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Those checks and balances have to be there. Otherwise, the rate at which it explodes with its responses kind of scares you, and you have to make sure that you're reading those responses responsibly, sort of.
Absolutely. And it seems like that
Anything.
the other thing I'm interested in is what are the kind of like the human skills that are going to matter, right? And the cool thing about observing the undergrads building things with AI all year is it's starting to give me some idea of like, what humans are still going to be useful for going forward. I'm very replaceable. Our students are not replaceable. Madeline and Danny aren't replaceable. But I think it's kind of interesting to kind of figure out what the AI can and cannot do, because what it cannot do, like that's an opportunity for humans still to, be essential to the process. And so that's the other thing I want to think about a lot in year 2 is these AIs augment a lot of human capacities, but in those zones where they can't do things, how do we make sure that humans hold on to those skill sets and get to deploy them in a unfettered way? Other things I see. Thanks, Justin. That's very nice of you to say.
Thank
Again, Danny's putting our email in there. Please reach out if anyone wants just to come and hang out, or just use our crazy video contraptions to. Yeah. Cool. Well, I mean, I have one last visual thing I can show you then. Madeline, are you ready? Can you share, Madeline? Do you mind showing them the Rosie?
Yeah,
The
for sure.
robot? This is just the thing, just when we've been talking to teachers, it's that same seminar that Madeline made the GPT for, that was on how students learn. We were trying to figure out how to, think about the idea of AI replacing teachers. And so we have one little slide of, I don't know if people watch the Jetsons. Did anyone watch the Jetsons? And, Rosie, the robot vacuuming. So we pop to Rosie, try not to let them see what comes after. Amazing. All right. So, so essentially, and this is something people talk about all the time when they're talking about things like skeuomorphic design or anthropocentrism or whatever. But when people are imagining the future, you tend to do it in terms of the present. And you tend to like imagine things in terms of the human. And so if we're imagining the future of vacuuming, we imagine, there's going to be this like robot that vacuums for me. But what actually happened, next slide, is, as we all know, probably the punchline of this one.
Sorry.
Is that we have the Roomba, right? We don't actually need something that's human-like, right? We need something that takes this function and achieves it, right? And so, and to me, like I've been thinking about this a little bit of when we're thinking about moving beyond trying to get the AI to be like a teacher. But what if we just think of all the functional roles that teachers play, all the things they have to get done, and maybe even something that the human body is not optimized for? Like students need a lot more feedback and a lot more attention than any single individual can give them, right? And some of it's got to be very high level attention, but some of it could be Roomba level attention. And so with this seminar, we started brainstorming what are the Roomba like tasks that we could imagine optimizing. And then the cool thing about the Roomba and anything like that, anything you build, is that there will be emergent properties that you can't predict. And so that's what this was. This is showing you if you build a Roomba-like thing, who knows who might use it to self-actualize or attack dogs or any of the many things that the cats in these GIFs are accomplishing with Roombas. Our own version of this is one of the very first apps we built was one that just logs what is happening at the table I'm at right now. It's microphone basically, and it just logs every minute to a Slack channel called Log Every Minute in Slack. It sends it to OpenAI's Whisper API, and then every single word that gets said here gets sent to that Slack channel. And that Slack channel is kind of like the Roomba, and other things can hop aboard it. So for instance, there's another channel called Log Every Minute in French that just listens to that channel and just, translates it into French. But then not so functional, but then a really functional use of this was, and Madeline, you did a ton of this early on, is we would use this to create on the fly handouts based on whatever the presenter was saying for every workshop we're giving. And so if one of our staff members was introducing a workshop on podcast for 15 minutes, we could not just by the end of class, but by the end of the time she was done talking, have a handout that has the nice little picture of what she wrote on the overhead. And then, the summary of what she said. And that was, that's more like the cat attacking the dog level of sophistication rather than just the cat riding the dog.
Danny, do we have the silent film worksheet? Like we did this for a class on silent film. That was a lot of fun. So we not
Yes.
only took notes, but then students were doing various creative work. Again, we're also, as you can see by Marlon's Crayola marker and cards, we're big fans of of physical material art supplies as a way to get students thinking. Not only are they happy and saying, oh, I haven't done this since X, Y, and Z, but it does genuinely make them approach problems differently and think differently. And they were doing this by analyzing shots. They were writing down maybe what the next placard, silent film placard could be. And then we also turned that into images. So by the end, they had images of themselves. They had a resource doc, and then they had transformations on not only what they had created packaged nicely, but transformations of what they had created packaged nicely.
Let me jump in and say something utopian, maybe as the last word, Madeline, because I get what you're saying about Crayolas. I get it. People, I haven't seen this since kindergarten, blah, 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 blah. Allow me to defend kindergarten. Maybe it's because when you used Crayola and art supplies, and that's kind of the main way you thought the world, is because you had no limitations, and you thought anything you could imagine could come to be. And that's cool. And we want people to have that feeling. And maybe one dream of AI is that, like the Roomba, who it frees up, there are a lot of people who you see just their legs in these Roomba ads, and they have these magnificent lives beyond their legs that are being kind of opened up because the Roomba is taking care of the vacuuming. Maybe that is what awaits us, is to have this kind of creativity associated with Crayola markers opened up and liberated once all of our Roomba-like tasks are being performed by the AI. That's what I'm going to hope for and work for anyways. And that's it. We should let you go for the day on that note. But again, we're here to talk. If anyone wants to chat, and it'd be lovely to meet any of you in person. If you want to come by, we're at 50 Church. Yeah, I'll hand it back to Deirdre.
Thank you, Marlon and Madeline and Danny. That was awesome. And I'll echo what Justin said as far as some really amazing work and very interesting to learn about. So thank you, everyone. And we'll be working on posting the recording. So if anyone has any colleagues that want to check this out, and we'll make sure to capture all of the resources that were shared in the chat to send those out as well for folks. But huge thank you. That's some really cool things over there.
Thank you. All right. Well, have a great day, everyone. We'll see you soon, I hope. Take care.
Take
Thank you.
care.
Thank you.